All right, so I talk a lot about plugins and I talk a lot about equalizers and which ones are my favorites, but I never really talked about specifically which tracks to use each of these hardware emulated equalizers on. Now, if you have money to buy the real hardware, I recommend getting it. But if you don't, then the plugins are a good second choice. Sometimes actually a good primary choice, depending on recalls and all that. But anyway, let's get started right away with brass. I don't talk about brass instruments very often. Saxophone, trumpet, trombone, things like that. Anyway, the number one EQ I recommend actually is a Neve 1084. But if you don't have money for the Noise Ash rendition of it, then check out Analog Obsession's Blend EQ. It's not exactly the same thing as a 1084, but it's pretty darn close. The one thing I would caution you about with Analog Obsession is I seem to be having some issues with my DAW restarting when these are on. I don't know if it's because of other plugins I'm using or what the deal is, but you should be made aware of that. Anyway, moving on, the next plugin is a Neve or really I should say hardware, is a Neve Portico 5033. And the free option is Fiverr from Analog Obsession. There's also another one which you can't download anymore, but actually since you're a Real Home Recording viewer, I'm going to link to it. And that's this plugin right here. I can't resize the interface, but otherwise I would make it bigger. But yeah, PQ33, no longer made. I don't think it was made 64-bit, but either way, if you have the money for it, Noise Ash, Need 533, sounds excellent, and also DDMF has their own rendition of it as well. And then finally, this is a new one to the equalizer plugin folder, and it's something that, in my opinion, may become my new workhorse equalizer. Yes, after many, many years of solid state logic emulations dominating my mixes, it's coming down to Green 5 Ultra, newly released from Acoustica Audio. This thing just sounds amazing. It can cut deeper than an SSL EQ. It sounds quote unquote cleaner. It is the ultimate analog equalizer that sounds digital, if that makes any sense. But digital is not a bad thing necessarily. All I have to say is try it out for yourself. I'm telling you guys, this one actually may, like right now my favorite EQ for shaping has been the Neve 1084 or the Neve 1081, but I may just end up using this at the very top, but we'll see. Moving on, like I said, I was having crashing issues, so I am actually going to have to reload all these plugins as I go along here. But next up is our synths, our synthesizers. So like, standard pop music kind of instruments, we'll say. So number one, speaking of SSL 4000G style equalization. It just sounds great. It's versatile. What can I say? It's a classic for synthesizers. And if you want the free version of this, then we have the SSQ from Analog Obsession. Before I forget, let me, I'll do that after I record the video. I was going to go through and delete all these Analog Obsession plugins just to test my theory. But anyway, next up, like I said, my new workhorse plugin is the Green 5 Ultra. Don't get me wrong, I'm probably not going to delete Sand, but Green 5 Ultra just, it's honestly, it's blown me away with its ability to just sound good on everything. Okay, so next up, This is a plugin I don't really talk about very often. It's the Harrison 32C, I believe. But anyway, the 32C, famous for, I believe it was on Michael Jackson's Thriller album, and then AC/DC, and it's been on a lot of places. A lot of people don't talk about the 32C very often, but it just sounds good in general, you know, and it's versatile. It's got nice filters, and if you're an acoustic audio fan, excuse me, they have their Honey 3 suite of plugins. This is their vintage one, which was sampled from an actual console. The classic one on Honey is they call it their homegrown or homebrew sampling, and then there's also a compressor. But again, the freebie from Analog Obsession is called Hercules, and you can make the GUI really big if you want. All right, next up we have piano, and number one seed is the Green 5 Ultra. Absolutely. And maybe that's because down here it looks like a piano. No, I'm kidding. No. Again, Green 5 just sounds awesome on all kinds of things, so why the heck not? Coming in second place, I will not be deleting this plugin. The Focusrite SC from Brainworks. It is just an excellent sounding plugin. For those that don't know, Rupert Neve, famous for his vintage equalizers from the, I believe early 60s is when they first started coming out. But basically back in the 1980s, Focusrite said, look, we want the best darn sounding console. Spare no expense. Just design it, and we'll see how much it costs. And so Rupert Neve did that, and the SC, the studio console, was born. And now you have it in a plugin. That's pretty darn cool, isn't it? Following up, just like always, now this is when Rupert Neve went solo. I believe in the 2000s is when Rupert Neve design started. And anyway, he designed the Neve, the Portico 5033 equalizer, which for me, it was his answer to the SSL 9000 equalizer. It was, his swan song, as it were. And this just sounds excellent on a lot of different sources, but it's clean, so you may not like it on a lot of things, but for piano for piano especially, the 5033 is good. Also sounds good for mastering. And then finally, like I said, the 1084, which by the way, the real one, the hardware doesn't have two mid-band sections. That's something that threw me off whenever I look at the hardware. I'm like, how come there's only 3 bands? But it does have the switch for the high pass and low pass filters, but they are concentric. And let's see, everything else is legit to the hardware. But yeah, Noise Ash makes a great clone of the Neve 1084. I've compared it to CD Soundmaster's 1084 sampling, and also Acoustica's EQs, and Noise Ash does an excellent job. Very low CPU, and I highly recommend it, especially for the price. Finally, for piano, Magenta, which is a Manley massive passive emulation. Not exactly, because the real massive passive sounds smoother because of its passive design. The Magenta, which I'm showing the older version of it. The Magenta from Acoustica is a serial equalizer, and which to me it means that it has more punch. So if I'm going for more punch, I'm going to go for the massive passive clone plugin. And hold on. Okay, bass guitar. First of all, we have the underrated company called Red Rock Sound. And for bass guitar, I like the API 560. You can shape it with it's a 10-band equalizer, and it just works really well a lot of times. Now, when it comes to anything electric guitar, I highly recommend shaping it with the tone knobs on your guitar first, then the tone knobs on the amp. You really want to try to get the best recording you can before the microphone or the DI box is involved. But then next up we have the Neve 1081. Again, this is the Noise Ash Need collection. And the 81 is a Class AB hardware EQ that just... The biggest feature is that it has 4 bands of equalization, number 1. It has a lot more frequency points, number 2. And it, to me, sounds more like an API as far as the way the sound is. It also has this high Q option, which the 1084 also has. You can also choose whether the low shelf and high shelf are a shelving filter or a, what is that called? Oh boy, I can't remember the name, but this little bump right here, I can't think of the name of it right now. But yeah, you can, there's so many choices with the Neve 1081. And yeah, Acoustica Audio makes their Neve equalizer, but I found that the Noise Ash one is either as good, if not better. And another cool feature they have with their Neve collection, you can make the different channels slightly different, like a real analog console would. And you do that with this control right here, nuance deviation. Okay, next up we have an API 550B emulation. Great on bass guitar. Actually, I don't know why I have... It really should be going in this order, where the 560 is like number 3. But either way, the 550B, excellent on a variety of sources, but particularly on bass guitar or bass synth. And finally, this is a newer addition to my collection, the Motown equalizer. Now, this has been released by several different companies in the past few years, but Noise Ash, you can't go wrong with them. They just make good sounding EQs, and the thing I really like about their Motown Pro or Motone Pro plugin is it has this frequency knob selector right here. Now, if you go all the way to the left, it is approximately half of whatever this is. So on the 5000, it'll be 2.5 or 2500. If you go down to 50, it'll be 25 hertz. 130 will be 65 hertz, and so on and so forth. And then you can choose in between that if you want. Obviously, the people that made the original Motown EQ, they chose some very good points. And if you don't know what the Motown EQ is, essentially it's a hybrid, in my opinion, of an API and a solid state. I think it's solid state. The solid state? If I'm wrong about that, I'm going to correct myself. But a solid state Pultec, but with 8 bands of EQ, right? 8, or is it 7? Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, only 7. This knob was confusing me. Plus filters. But anyway, this is a really good electric bass plug-in equalizer. And if you have the real deal, even if it's a clone, good for you.